To my darling daughter, this is one of those letters that I hope you never have to read. Similar to a suicide note explaining the actions of the deceased, and it burdens my heart with grief to say that the death isn't mine, and this obituary is actually yours. I'm sure by now that the sea of your mind is plagued with numerous boats of questions sunk by the waves of your raging emotions, but please, listen. Despite the ominous opening of this letter, it is actually an apology. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you have to be afraid of me. I'm sorry that my silence presently couldn't guarantee you a future where being a woman is not a crime punishable by the death penalty in a trial that had no jury, no evidence, and the courtroom seats were filled with negligence and ignorance of our society. The judge called for you and said, "Defendant, rise." Of which was ironic because when I looked around, nobody was there to defend you. And you were too scared to. Your voice drowned in the pool of your own tears until despair filled your lungs and you breathed your last breath. And the final verdict was in. Guilty, he said. Guilty of being nurturing. Guilty of being kind. Guilty of being an angel that dared to fly with wings of compassion. Guilty of falling prey to the predator that is me, a typical man beyond intoxicated with power and authority, to think that I was made to be God's hand and you his heart, and instead of holding and protecting you, I clenched my fists because that's what men do to flex their strength, and in that process, I crushed you. I squeezed the life out of you until you bled out agony, and I still had the audacity to say you were guilty of being weak, guilty of being the victim, guilty of being a woman. Baby girl, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that on your 18th birthday I gave you a knife, thinking I was trying to protect you, but all I was doing was slowly restructuring your DNA to be more like mine, teaching you to take life like me when you were actually made to give it. And on your 21st birthday, instead of a key, I gave you a prison. In the form of a gun, because I was too much of a coward to warn you that when you start dating, picking your next boyfriend, and that might later become your husband, you are in fact choosing your own killer. It was my way of giving you the upper hand, some time to practice to better your chances of winning the imminent game of rock paper victim that you would be forced to play one day soon. Because every time you played by the rules, you lost. Rocks can be broken, and when you threw scissors in the face of the so-called justice system, your sharp screams just couldn't cut it. And the thousands of signatures on petitions submitted in truckloads of paper meant to protect the present and prevent future victims were burned to ashes. So I thought you would have a better chance of surviving with a trigger in your hand and a few bullets. And in response to my actions, I watched your nature change as I took away one of the greatest joys in your existence, having children, forced you to give birth to either a culprit or a victim. God forbid if by some miracle you became a mother of twins. I can't imagine the anguish you'd feel years later when you're slaving away in a kitchen preparing a meal for your son who will be dining on a different table than yours, located inside a prison. And the sorrow that would swallow your soul when you buy fresh flowers every Sunday morning to put in your daughter's grave when you visit the cemetery. The rain of tears that would fall from your eyes watering her gravestone as the cries of all women echoed in the distance. To my darling daughter, this is one of those letters that I hope you never have to read. Similar to a suicide note explaining the actions of the deceased, and it burdens my heart with grief to say that this death isn't actually mine, and this obituary is yours.